Congresswoman Spanberger, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Certainly when I travel across our district, I hear from constituents who are frustrated by the ongoing crisis at the southern border. You know, my constituents, like so many Americans, expect a secure border. They expect, and they are right to expect lawful immigration system that works. Protecting our borders is really a matter of national security. And we must have lawful and orderly channels within our immigration system. I have long supported hiring more Customs and Border Patrol officers, common sense improvements to address the immigration backlog. But I come at this question as a former intelligence officer and for a time worked transnational criminal organizations throughout Central and South America. And I know that we just can't wait for the problems to turn into a crisis at the border, that some of the root challenges that are the topic of this hearing, we can't just wait for that to mean people fleeing from natural disasters, people looking for economic opportunity, people fleeing rampant lawlessness and trying to create a better life for their families. And so addressing these root causes really has to be a central part of the strategy that we, the United States, employs. So I appreciate this hearing. I had a couple follow-up questions on some of the topics that have been brought up. Mr. Farnsworth, I believe it was you who talked about USMCA and the comments about bringing in Central American countries I found to be pretty interesting. Could you comment a little bit, because I am curious whether or not such a proposal, as you mentioned, bringing Central American countries in on a country-by-country negotiation basis, what would the impact be potentially for wealthier, more stable countries like Panama versus far more economically or unstable countries like some of the others? Could you comment on that?
Thanks for the question. First of all, clarification, Panama is not part of the CAFTA-DR. They have a separate bilateral trade.
So you're speaking specifically of CAFTA-DR countries? Yes,
but having said that, would be open to a broader approach as well, including Panama and other U.S. free trade partners in the Americas, for sure. But in the context of divergence in the region itself, it's a reality. I mean, Costa Rica, for example, is the wealthiest country in Central America, as you know, and probably one of the most ready, along with the Dominican Republic, of the CAFTA-DR partners to move early into the space. And they would get a first mover benefit, absolutely, because investors will take that as, if I can use the cliche, good housekeeping seal of approval, and to say, look, the United States, there's rule of law, there's institutionality, there's recourse to adjudication for disputes, et cetera.
And in doing it that way, as you propose, as you're thinking about it, does that create a disadvantage for other countries, or does that create?
My view and the argument is that it actually creates an incentive for the other countries to get their act together. Because if they don't, they fall further and further behind. So let's play this out. Let's say you have, I'll just pick two countries, Costa Rica and the Dominican Republic. Yeah. Let's say they move first. They then get the early mover advantage of investors, but you have the Guatemalas, El Salvadors, and Hondurases of the world who would say, look, we need to be at the same level, otherwise our investments are going to suffer by definition. And so you build those internal constituencies, particularly in the private sector, which gets in the face of its own government and says, get your act together. We need to have that access to the North American supply chains because we are falling behind. They're doing it for commercial and parochial reasons, no doubt. But at the same time, it has public policy implications. And one of the things we have not done, in my view, in Central America very well, is to get the local constituencies on board with our agenda. In fact, in many cases, we've ignored the local constituencies, tried to work around them, called them names, called them corrupt, et cetera. We need to change that.
And when you're can you define a little bit further, for the sake of this discussion, who are the local constituencies that you're talking about?
Local private sector entities, in some cases governments, for sure, even some of the NGO community. There's a lot of really good work happening right now in the Northern Triangle that's created by the countries in question and the communities in question that simply is not being incorporated because we have a different approach. Okay, fair enough, but I can tell you, because I've had personal conversations with multiple folks in this regard, it's also causing resentment in the region, and it's causing defensiveness and saying, why aren't you working with us? We're the local community, right? You're disavowing us, you're calling us names. We want to be part of the solution, and we can be part of the solution, and frankly, there is no solution apart from the local private sector and the local constituency. So we have to find a way to change that dynamic.
And specific to the USMCA example that you mentioned of bringing in the CAFTA-DR countries, have you spoken with people on the ground who are specifically interested in USMCA? What have those conversations been like?
There's real enthusiasm
Yeah.
for the idea of finding a way to link judicially and legally into North American supply chains for a sustainable long-term approach. There's some concern among some parties in terms of some of the provisions of USMCA, right? Labor and environment and enforceability and all those things. Fair enough.
Yep.
That's what negotiations are for. But it's also the way, if I can say, for the United States to now promote with positive incentives rather than sanctions and name calling, the agenda and the values that we are seeking to promote. So we've changed the incentive structure, and we've built a new constituency to align with what we're actually trying to achieve in the
Because
region.
we've changed the framework of the conversation. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I yield back. Thank you, sir.